morning. I'll be leading us through a couple of exercises this morning. And before we jump into exercises, we don't always talk about what spiritual formation is. Don't usually spend a lot of time about theological assumptions, but I thought this morning, before we do what's called a spiritual location exercise, it might be good to remind us what this is about. Like group meditation is wonderful, and like when our collective intentions are pointed in a certain direction together, I feel like there's a little more power to it, a little more meaning to it. And as always, I appreciate you all going on the journey with me, not knowing what we're going to do, just kind of sitting and doing it together. I appreciate that. But like you heard in the Psalm and the other lectionary passages for this morning from Ezekiel and from 2 Samuel, there's a lot of talk, whether overtly or not, about enemies and about those opposing and like destruction and what do we do with all that. So rather than read those passages later, I thought we would reflect on a poem by Wendell called Enemies. But before we do that, before we can even, I think, reflect on what it's like to love our enemies, it's good for us to settle into our bodies and kind of locate ourselves, locate our spirits and our souls together. So, but before we jump into that, Spiritual Formation Sundays, Contemplative Sundays, it's all geared toward practices, meditations that will help us become more like Jesus, become more Christ-like, more like God. And what I love about the person of Jesus, that is who has kept me in Christianity all these years when I wanted to throw it all away, is that Jesus often referred to himself, or people refer to him as the Son of Man, which a better translation is the human one, which I love so much because, yeah, we think about Jesus as fully God. We also think of Jesus as fully human. And sometimes we forget about the human part, especially when we're beating ourselves up over not being what we would deem good humans, or we've got the religious trauma that's piled on, the shoulds that we should be doing. So as we're doing these exercises, it's slowing us down long enough to reflect on what's going on internally, what's going on with the Spirit of God inside of us, and so that we can become like Jesus, become fully human. And in our becoming fully human, we are also learning to become fully divine like Jesus. What I love about Jesus is he shows us both how to operate in divinity, but also operate in humanity. And he's rarely reactionary, too. I love that aspect. He is reactionary, like the time where he was hungry and he cursed a fig tree because it didn't have any fruit on it. Sure, there's like allegory and meaning to that, but he was also hangry. So I appreciate that we see like the humanity of Jesus there, too. But he shows us how to operate in full divinity, and when it's time to set it down, like in Philippians 2, we hear that he took off his glory to become like us. But also when it's time to pick it back up, and in his ascension and transfiguration and other ways. So he's teaching us how to flow and how to operate in divinity and humanity. And so as we're doing these exercises, that's what that's all about. Little exercises to help point our intentions, to make us more like Christ, so that we collectively are more like Christ to ourselves, to the people around us, to our communities. One interesting thing I shared with the kids on the way over here, if you're into the neuroscience of it all, but meditation, prayer, contemplative exercises, all of this is what helps activate our parasympathetic nervous system. So if you know anything about that, our sympathetic nervous system is the thing that helps keep us alive, our fight, flight, freeze, fawn, those reactions, and that all functions from our what we call our lizard brain, the oldest part of our human brain. But the world around us has evolved, I think, faster than our biology. And so doing exercises like this to help move us out of that reactionary brain, that lizard brain, to move us into this prefrontal cortex where we can actually consider before we react. All of these exercises that we do are for that. Even just simple deep breathing can move us into that parasympathetic way of functioning, so that we are less reactionary, less to jump to anger without knowing the meaning behind the anger and potentially using the anger for a good thing, but less harming of others by being reactionary. So as we're doing this morning, it might be good to take a moment, maybe if you do want to journal in this first exercise, we've got pens and paper over there. Take a minute as you're settling in to see if there's an intention that you have for yourself. If any of this Christ-likeness language resonates with you, set an intention for that. If it doesn't, please set it aside. I don't want it to be a barrier for what we're going to do this morning. So let's take a few breaths, and if you need to take those breaths to get pens and paper, do that, and then we'll jump into the spiritual location exercise. All right, so this is going to help us settle into our bodies, settle into our minds, help locate our spirits, our souls, where we are in relation to ourselves, to God, and to others. And as we're coming into this, there's 6 questions that I'm going to ask, and know that there is not really a right answer. The right answer is your most authentic and vulnerable response to the question. So please don't place any shoulds on yourself, any Sunday school language you feel like you have to bring out. Your most authentic and vulnerable response to the question is it. All right, so for the first few minutes, we'll just breathe, settle into your bodies, get comfortable, take deep breath in and out. If you feel disconnected from your body, it's helpful sometimes to put a hand on your heart and a hand on your belly. Just feel yourself breathing, feel your heart beating. Just keep breathing in deeply, in and out, settling into the space. Now let's reflect together. In this season of your life, what have been your dominant thoughts? Spend a few minutes reflecting on that. In this season of life, what have been your dominant thoughts? If you're not ready to move on, that's okay. The next question is, in this season of your life, what have been your dominant feelings? In this season of life, what have been your dominant feelings? Again, you can stay if you need to. Next question, though. In this season of your life, what has been the condition of your body? In this season of life, what has been the condition of your body? We'll conclude the first set of these questions. Spend a little bit more time right here. Last one here for this section. In this season of your life, what has been your strongest desire? In this season of your life, what has been your strongest desire? Feel free to take some extra time with any of those questions if you feel drawn back to one. Maybe sit with this desire question just a little bit longer. It's natural to start to feel a little stressed or to have shallow breathing as we are interrogating these things with ourselves. If you notice that, unclench, breathe deeply. You're in the presence of love right now. Breathe into that. Before we move on to the next two questions, maybe there's something underneath the desire you were able to name. Is there more to it? What you're naming as your strongest desire. In this season of your life, what has been your strongest desire? And maybe there's something underneath what you're able to name that might be the real desire, the real longing underneath that. Right now, for the last two questions, in about 3 minutes each on these. In a sentence, where are you today? How would you describe it? In a sentence, where are you today? How would you describe it? Last question for this time. In a sentence, what is the divine doing in the season of your life? In a sentence, what is God doing in this season of your life? If you're still writing, that's okay. For the last few minutes here, look over the things that you wrote down, or if it was a list in your head, run through it in your head, and non-judgmentally look at what the last 20 minutes have been, and see what you notice about the things that you wrote down, or the things about that you listed off in your head mentally, and see what emotions come up. See if anything surprises you. Just pay attention to that. If you do notice a surprise or a strong emotion as you look this over, maybe wonder about it. Wonder in the presence of God. What more is there? What is the Spirit of God doing right now? If you need more time, you can keep writing or reflecting. We'll move into time where you can share if you'd like to. I realize this is potentially a lot of sensitive, really personal, really vulnerable things that come up doing this. Nobody has to say a thing if they don't want to. That was really rich to hear. Thank you all. This next one will be much shorter, a little less prescriptive. Like I said, the scriptures felt like the subtext was all about enemies and dealing with enemies. And we can't do that well when we're in a reactionary state. We're functioning from that lizard brain. So settling in, locating ourselves, it's a good practice to then reflect on enemy love. And instead of using scripture, which can sometimes be a bit triggering for us, we're going to reflect on this Wendell Berry poem. And I'd like to recommend that the first time, just let me read it and close your eyes and hear the words. And then I'll read it again, but the second time, if you want to, read along with me. And just like we did, pay attention to the emotions that come up. Pay attention, see what words shimmer as I say them or as you read them. And just notice non-judgmentally what's going on in your body, in your spirit, as I read this. If you are not to become a monster, you must care what they think. If you care what they think, how will you not hate them, and so become a monster of the opposite kind? From where then is love to come? Love for your enemy, that is the way of liberty. From forgiveness? Forgiven they go, free of you, and you of them. They are to you as sunlight on a green branch. You must not think of them again, except as monsters like yourself, pitiable because unforgiving. We'll read it one more time. Feel free to read along if you'd like. Still pay attention to what's coming up for you. What are you noticing in your body and in your spirit? If you are not to become a monster, you must care what they think. If you care what they think, how will you not hate them, and so become a monster of the opposite kind? From where then is love to come? Love for your enemy, that is the way of liberty? From forgiveness. Forgiven, they go, free of you, and you of them. They are to you as sunlight on a green branch. You must not think of them again, except as monsters like yourself, pitiable because unforgiving. Sit with whatever you notice, whatever words, whatever feelings, just a few minutes. Just wonder about them, non-judgmentally. And in the last couple minutes here, is there anything that you're noticing that isn't yours to carry with you? Or that isn't yours to carry alone? And perhaps, what would it look like to ask God, to ask the divine for help? To ask somebody around you for help? Anybody want to share about that exercise? Anything surprising? Or how you're feeling now?